In the huge world of hi-fi, I think it's only natural that differing opinions will exist. But when it comes to the reviews of the Eversolo Play, the differing opinions I think are really quite contradictory, maybe even controversial. Because one big media outlet has said the Play is the best value streaming amplifier of 2025, so a big title, whereas another big media outlet said it had below average sound quality. But how can it be both of those things? It can't. And I think this is confusing for buyers. So I wanted to try and unravel this to see if the Eversolo Play CD Edition has been overrated or underrated. In 2025, the hi-fi industry spoils audiophiles, so I think expectations are overly high. And that's especially true with a product like the Eversolo Play CD Edition, because it seems to be able to do everything for us in a very compact, beautifully styled, very real-world priced package. And I think that kind of technology at that price was not available only a few years ago. So it's important, regardless of anything else, that we don't take this technology development for granted. And I was very impressed by the Play's overall design, because it manages to avoid feeling built to a tight budget, even though I'm sure it must be, doing all that it can for its £699 price tag, which is of course a lot of money. But when you think this is a high-res music streamer, a DAC, a preamplifier, 2 power amplifiers, a moving magnet and moving coil phono stage, and a CD player with a really nice quality touchscreen, again, let's not take for granted or underappreciate what we have here. And I particularly liked how Eversolo have been using the underside of the Play for its heat sinking, so it can be substantial and external, but you don't see it. How clever is that? And it seems to work great, as the Play barely gets warm even after hours of blasting music. Well, that is until you play a CD, then the top gets quite warm, which is quite interesting in itself. And I thought the CD player sounded a little more pleasing than streamed music in the main, so there is that too. That doesn't mean everything is perfect. I think Eversolo made one big mistake. Looking at the Play from the rear, it's amazing to have this many connections on such a small unit, with none of them feeling too squashed together, and that includes a HDMI EARC connection that I know is essential for a lot of people. I was also impressed with the quality of the speaker cable terminals that, again, don't feel too squashed together, so your speaker cables have plenty of distance from each other. Cyrus, please take note of this. And I was definitely impressed to see no aerials needed for Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, as that has to be better. However, I think Eversolo's mistake is having a line-in analog connection and not a line-out analog connection. And the reason this makes no sense to me is the fact that the Play CD Edition is an all-in-one, isn't it? It's designed to do everything for us, including a CD player and a phono stage. So what other products are Eversolo expecting someone to want to connect to it? And from an analog connection, maybe a cassette player? And I actually think it would have made more sense to have a line out, so we could have connected directly to a bigger, more powerful amplifier. And that makes me think of the product that defined this category, the NAD M10, because that does have a line out, and I found it sounded significantly better when you connect to a bigger, more powerful amplifier. And that's all I'm going to say on this topic. When it comes to the front layout and screen, I have nothing to complain about. Yes, the screen is a touchscreen, even though that makes no sense for an amplifier designed for you to sit a distance away from it, it's still a touchscreen. I care more that it's a very nice screen to look at that has a glossy look to its image, which maybe sounds insignificant, but it's not compared to the more dull and flat looking screen of the Bluesound Node icon that costs more. So the screen on the Play really stands out to me as being nicer. I also really like the independent brightness controls for the screen and volume control halo, which is color customizable, and I appreciated that. That's a cool thing. And Eversolo are famous for having fancy digital VU meters, and we get them here. And this 5.5-inch screen I could see pretty well sat 4+ meters away, especially for the volume level, so that is great. And there is also not much to grumble about with the Play streaming support and app experience. Eversolo are still one of the only brands to offer Apple Music support in their streaming products, so that is standout here of course. I don't use Apple, I use Qobuz, but all of the main streaming services are supported, including all the Connect services, Bluetooth, and it's room ready. The Eversolo Control app user experience is almost identical to all other Eversolo products, and that means you get the same user experience as someone who has spent thousands on the flagship DMP-A10, so that is cool. And the app is great for giving you lots of options without feeling too cumbersome, with most things being self-explanatory or easy to learn. The music navigation experience is fast and flows nicely with no lists anywhere. And it's easy to get to the music you want playing or to go discovering new music favourites. However, I was disappointed to see that Eversolo have still not fixed a specific gripe of mine. The selection of how you want your favourites to be organised is not saved, so you have to make that selection each time you visit your favourites, which is super annoying. Eversolo, you're the only company with this app issue, please fix it. If you planned to use a subwoofer with the Play, as I think many might want to, and if you want to high pass your main speakers, there are a set of options here to help you set this up, and that is great. And there are also several different equalizer options too, and I found this very useful. Again, this is all the same as in the flagship A10 with one exception. With the Play, I could only seem to have one EQ saved profile, and I would have preferred several as I wanted something different for vinyl as I did to streamed music, and I couldn't seem to do that. And I know you can have several different saved profiles in the A10, but maybe this was just a user error on my part. I should also mention that Eversolo have their own room correction feature, which is very simple and easy to use. However, I think it's a very basic and very simple room correction offering compared to what I'm used to as more of a power user in this regard. So I would say for this type of product, it's easy for you to try. If you prefer the sound with it on, then you should use it. But just don't expect like a miracle amount of maybe improvement to the sound. It doesn't quite work like that. But if it's better for you, use it. It just wouldn't be something that I would use personally. It's not quite what I want. I want more customization in the sound with a solution like this. And I just hope that Eversolo continue to improve this as part of their development. For vinyl playback, I was really surprised to see both a moving magnet and moving coil phono stage in this size and price of products. Normally, we only get moving magnet stages built into amplifiers that cost much more. And the moving coil stage has some crazy good specs too, such as 74 decibels of gain. So that is a lot of gain on paper, although I'm not sure that tells the full truth, as I had to have the volume up very high for vinyl playback, a lot higher than digital. And vinyl sounded okay. The phono stage is open, clear and crisp sounding. And I could easily hear the different sound character of vinyl compared to digital. But it was also very reserved and really quite held back sounding and just not massively dynamic. But I'm very conscious of the fact that I was using a very high-end cartridge that was maybe too demanding for this phono stage. So look, take these comments for what they are. I thought the phono stage was much better than I expected, but it's definitely not perfect. And lastly, I need to speak about the CD player, which is without a doubt the most standout thing here, because this gives the Play a huge edge over its nearest competitor, the WiiM Amp Ultra. It is, I believe, more of a CD-ROM than a CD player. If that matters to you, it doesn't to me. And the drive is a little clunky in operation, and it does feel a little flimsy, like every super slim ROM drive does. But we know that this is a tried and tested technology. I did find it picked up CDs and played them very fast, but it was also a little fussy, not liking some of my older, less well cared for CDs. And despite me being really impressed by a lot of this, I would say none of it was new to me, or none of it was much of a surprise, because all of this is what Eversolo does great. They kind of set the standard of expectation for products, I think especially at this kind of price level. And I think that only happens when people like what you do. And like the Play is no exception. It's an absolutely lovely, fully featured hi-fi product. But where there has been like this, contradictory or maybe controversial opinions is all to do with the sound quality. So of course, that's the bit I really wanted to test. Normally, I would never watch or read someone else's review of a product I'm going to review myself because I don't want any external influence. But when you're last, and I think I probably am last in the whole world to review the Eversolo Play, and that's by my own choice, it's been nearly impossible to not, see other reviews for it. And I will be honest, I was influenced by the What Hi-Fi review, because when it came time to do my initial listening testing, I was expecting a 2 out of 5, a below average sound quality, and that's just not what I got. And to describe the Play's sound, if you've listened to Eversolo's original DMPA6 music streamer, I would say the Play reminds me of an amplifier version of that. So you get all of the same strengths and weaker points of the A6. You get a fast, precise, clean and clear sound that is very good for soundstage, imaging, space, and music specificity and detail. The bass is tight and very controlled. It's a bit dry as a result of being so controlled, but it's a very detailed bass. And the vocals are similar, very clear, very precise, but they are a bit tonally undernourished for my taste, but they are very detailed sounding again. But as a downside to its overall sound character, it comes across like maybe it's taking music a little bit too seriously, trying to be very, very specific and precise with everything. So it has more of an analytical sound. So that is a bit leaner a bit undernourished, a bit leaner overall, and maybe a little bit too over exuberant in the kind of upper mid-range and the high frequencies. And that is absolutely fine in some music, but you'll have other tracks like Sienna Spiro's Die on the Hill, where her vocal is already a little bit edgy. So when you have an edgy vocal plus an over exuberant sounding system, that becomes then too much of a good thing. And it's not necessarily a massively pleasing way to listen to that song because it can be a bit shouty, a bit attacking, a bit too aggressive in the vocals. I also found I needed to have the volume turned up high, and that was to get any sound. For starters, like the first 60 dB of the volume control does nothing, which feels odd, and maybe that would be different with super high sensitivity horn speakers, but I don't know how many people with horn speakers are looking to use the Play or vice versa, let's be honest about it. But I had to have the volume on what I thought was about the maximum or near maximum all of the time, and that was especially true when listening to vinyl. So the claimed 60 watts of power into 8 ohms or 110 watts into 4 ohms per channel sounds like a lot, but I have found that with Class D amplifiers, it always seems like you need more power in watts compared to, Class AB amplifiers or Class A amplifiers, just in terms of how music comes across. And by that I mean like it's driving, it's like its energy, its fullness, its dynamics, or its ballsiness. And sorry to use such a crude term, but it's the right one. Like it's ballsiness, the ballsiness to the sound of the music. And that's definitely not the big strength of the Eversolo Play. Instead, it's like all of its power is going into controlling the music, keeping it tight and focused and articulate, rather than making it sound really lively, dynamic and fun. So look, which do you think you would prefer? Well, I think to make that decision, you need some context. And to get some context, you need to do what Darko calls a side-by-side comparison, which of course is really important for a review like this. And I often think you can tell if a reviewer's done a side-by-side comparison because they should be able to show you both of the products in the listening room at the same time. And I also think that reviewers should show you their listening room and how they have products set up, because that context of what speakers they're using, what size of room, and how they have the system set up is hugely important context. And I think that's been missing from a lot of hi-fi reviews for a really long time, and I would like to see that start to change. And I could have compared the Eversolo Play to the WiiM Amp Ultra, because that does make sense, but that's also a boring comparison because that's what everybody's done. That comparison's been done to death, so we would learn nothing new. And I wanted to put different publications' claims to the test. Was the Play, as some have suggested, the best sound you can get for the pound or the dollar? Well, £699 buys you a WiiM amp ultra streaming DAC and a pair of the very highly regarded Fosi V3 monoblock amplifiers. And I thought this would be a more interesting comparison to do, and it showed me exactly what I thought I knew and some new things. And the WiiM and Fosi combination worked really nicely together. It sounded surprisingly full and substantial, very ballsy actually, so quite warm and pleasing. Not the most refined sound, but balanced nicely to be lively, upbeat and pleasing. And those were pretty big positives. I liked the Fosi and WiiM combination for its more kind of solid, full sound, right? That was definitely a positive. But maybe as a negative, I found that system to be a bit dark sounding and a bit thick sounding. So the music presentation was a bit thicker and a bit more congested together, which I think is where some of that solidity is coming from. But I didn't mind it. And actually, that was my preference, overall preference from the two. Again, because I like a more full, like strong, ballsy, solid sound. But this showed to me two really important things. Firstly, I would not say that the Play is outright the best sounding hi-fi product for the money, as one publication said. But it was also not, as another publication said, a below average performer either. I think both of these opinions are far too extreme. And I wanted to test this more, so I stepped up the WiiM Ultra to the more expensive Bluesound Node Icon, again using it as a streamer, DAC and preamplifier. And paired with the Fosi amps, this setup delivered a cleaner, clearer, more open and spacious delivery that was more refined, so better technically and better for audiophile reasons, but I found it to be a bit lacking in excitement and the music was back to being just a little too lean for my taste. And this was the best sounding setup from the three, as it should be with its higher price. But the reason I did this test was just to confirm what the pros and cons are for the two setups I was listening to before, to be 100%. And there was very clearly some standout pros about the Play's sound. So I decided to get clever and use the graphic equalizer in the Eversolo Play to raise the bass in a specific way and lower the treble ever so slightly. And this tweak to the Play's sound character closed the gap between all three systems. The Play now sounded nicer, a little warmer, definitely less over exuberant in the mids and highs with the music that is like that, without losing its big strengths, the space and detail in the music. Being honest, it was still the most mechanical sounding of the three, and I still had to listen at what I perceived as being like the maximum volume all of the time, and that was for an 85 dB average listening level. And that was with the fairly high 90.5 dB sensitivity Canton GLE 90 S2 speakers. So good quality speakers that are easier to drive, and they would definitely be easier to drive than all of the stand mount speakers that was used in a lot of the Play reviews. And I thought that was some crucial context and information to share. So I learned some important things here. If you want the convenience of having everything in the one very small chassis, well then of course there's going to be some compromise with that. And just like with the NAD M10, the compromise comes in the amplifier and the power and how that can kind of drive a set of speakers, like with energy and dynamics, right? That is where your compromise is. But that might not even matter to you depending on how you're going to set your hi-fi system up. If you're looking to set up what I call a sideboard hi-fi system, you know, like with the Play in the middle and two speakers either side, well then look, maybe you're not even going to really care. Maybe you're not even going to, you know, have the kind of expectations that I was looking for from the system. Maybe you won't listen to it anywhere near as loud as I was. So all of these things come into play. But the irony of this situation is, and I think Eversolo marketed the Play as being ideal for like bookshelf speakers in that kind of sideboard situation. I don't think that is how you get the best out of it personally. And I actually think if you have speakers that are very, very close together, there may be an amplifier setup that's all about drive, all about dynamics, all about like fun and liveliness will sound better in that situation, because like you're not going to get the benefit of all the, you know, the spaciousness and specificities where the Play's biggest strengths are. So like context, think about what you want, think about what you're looking to achieve, and think about how you set things up and what speakers you use with it. And to try and test this more, I set up my Mission 770 speakers that are not hard to drive, but are 88 dB sensitivity in just 2 ways. They have more in common with smaller bookshelf speakers to a point. And they did need more driving than the Canton speakers did to deliver the same overall scale, bass and dynamic experience. And the Play did okay. I could hear it was driving the Missions fairly well, with the same sonic good and less good traits to its sound, but the music was not as dynamic sounding as when using the higher sensitivity, more drivers Canton speakers, and therein lie the biggest lesson, I think. The Eversolo Play CD Edition is a very lovely hi-fi product to live with because it makes listening to music very simple, very flexible, very easy and very small. But it does have an obvious kind of limitation to what it can do. And maybe that will matter to you or maybe it won't, depending on what your expectations are. But if you buy into some of the hype out there and use it with tiny speakers and have very lofty aspirations, then maybe you'll be disappointed. But if you actually think about what you want from it, think about the context of how you're going to use it, and maybe think about the speakers and what you look to achieve from those speakers, and maybe use slightly larger ones that are higher sensitivity, making it easier for that amplifier to get the most out of the speaker, well then there's no reason why you can't get a very good overall listening experience that sounds large and quite dynamic and very clear and precise. Tweak that EQ and you can make it sound warmer and more pleasing, and you can have a hell of a lot of fun from such a small package for a very real world price. So there's a lot of positives to come out of it. But I just want to add to that, I think this is kind of where modern hi-fi sound quality starts. It starts here. This is not the pinnacle. This is where it starts. So if you're new to this and this kind of product and sound you get gives you the bug, all I want to say is welcome to the club, and you should know that there is a lot more, you can get a hell of a lot more music experience from listening to music as you level things up. But as I said, welcome to the club. I hope this review's been helpful, hope it's been useful, and if you've enjoyed the review, hit the thumbs up and subscribe to see more.